My name is Zipporah. Hebrew for it is a Hebrew word for bird, and Zipporah was the wife of Moses. My aide this morning told me that. And I am a social worker by profession.
Oh, really?
Retired almost before I started. And then I became interested in art, pre-Columbian art specifically. And if you look around the house, you'll see some of the things that I've collected, which I enjoy having, but which most of all I enjoyed learning about. And it's a fascinating study of pre-Columbian cultures in South America, and I did slide talks and lectures in various places and had some exhibits of my collection. I am the mother of Aram Sheffrin, who is a lawyer practicing in Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island. He was a graduate of Columbia and Harvard Law School. He worked for about 2.5 years in a law office, and then he decided he wanted to do rock music. So
Finally, somebody has the nerve to do that.
What are we doing?
So you never met before?
No, but he's like a member, he feels like a member of the family.
Garden. They did something at Carnegie Hall with their own music, which they wrote. And after 10 years, he met somebody who persuaded him that it was time to give it up, and so he went back to law, but not in New Jersey, rather in Rhode Island. Unfortunately, he does not have any children, so I have no grandchildren.
Tell me a bit about your social work background.
I went to a school which was called the Graduate School of Jewish Social Work, which no longer exists. It was funded by a federation, I guess, and we had our Jewish content courses on West 47th Street, where the school was situated, and we had our casework courses at the New York School, become part of Columbia School of Social Work. I did volunteer work for Council of Jewish Women in Passaic before they became affiliated with Federation and established the Jewish Family Service. And I was also a member of the National Committee of Council for a short time. That was during the war. And
What kind of
then I went back to social work as a member of the staff of the Clifton Family Mental Health Clinic for about 1.5 years. And then I began to do volunteer work again.
You were a member of the Board of Education, weren't you?
Yes, I was very active in all kinds of things in the community. I was on the Board of Education, and I was involved with Teachers College while I was on the Board of Education. And what else did I do? Oh, Hadassah, UJA, the Jewish weekly calendar, newspaper rather, and I don't know, a lot of things I don't remember anymore. How I,
You used to send things into, didn't you have a calendar that you sent?
Oh yes, I forgot all about that. I started a calendar of cultural events for the state of New Jersey, which ran for 33 years in the New York Times And for part of that time in the Star Ledger and the Star Ledger of Newark and the Bergen Record of Bergen County and the Passaic Herald News of Passaic County.
Wow. Quite a lot of accomplishments.
She's a very accomplished woman.
What kind of social work did you actually do? Did you counsel adults?
No, I did psychiatric social work. I was trained at the Neurological Institute in New York.
And what kind of work did you actually do? Were you like diagnosing clients?
I did what social workers do, act important. No, I was not actually professionally involved for very long because I was married shortly after I got out of graduate school, and I became involved in the local community affairs. And it wasn't until much later, as a matter of fact, my son was about to be married when I was offered a job with the mental health clinic. And I was with them for a year and a half. I also worked in my husband's office. That was the most flexible kind of job to have, because I could take care of my own things at the same time.
I've also heard you're a sculptor?
I?
Yeah, or I've heard you were some.
Sarah
artist.
Small was the sculptor of the family.
Okay, I guess I have that confused.
No, I never did anything like that. I wish I could. I collected art, but I didn't actually do it.
I see. And it looks like you still do collect.
Well, not really. Now I'm just enjoying what I have, and I am interested in deaccessioning. So if you know anybody who is interested in pre-Columbian art and would like to acquire some things, have them get in touch with me.
Okay. I don't, but I'll keep that in mind. I actually do have a relative who works in museums, so I'll talk to her.
Who is that?
Her name is Jane. Jane Fearer Safer.
Is she my cousin?
No, she's on my father's side.
Oh. Which museum does she work in?
One of the big ones in New York, or at least she used to the last time I've talked with her. I don't know, that was quite a while ago, so I don't know if she's still there.
That's interesting.
I'll find out. I'll see what I can find out.
Okay.
So, tell me a bit about what memories you have of your grandmother.
Yes, I wanted to talk about my grandmother because she is really, I think, the most illustrious member of the Pink family.
Really? What's her name?
Her name was Esther Pink. She was really a saintly, pious woman. She used to fast twice a week on Monday and Thursday, and on those days she would go by foot all over town collecting money for her various charities. And one of her dreams was to establish a hospital which would serve Jewish patients kosher food. And indeed, she did that. She was the founder of Beth Israel Hospital in Passaic. My grandfather, Reuben Pink, her husband, built the first apartment houses in Passaic. And he had as a partner somebody by the name of Pashman. So it was Pink and Pashman. And one of the Pashman progeny became a member of the state of New Jersey Supreme Court. And as a matter of fact, he is a rather steady date of my cousin Gladys. So that's another Pink and Pashman arrangement.
So this activity of being the founder of Beth Israel, was it? And building apartments. That was like around the turn of the century. Would that be about right?
After the turn of the century.
After, so maybe 1910s, 1920s.
No, later than that.
In the 20s at the earliest, I think.
All right. What memories do you have of her herself also?
Oh, I have so many stories about her. First of all, I want to say that when she died, there was an editorial in the local paper, and it was headed, Esther Pink, Mother of the Poor. She used to be a one-person social agency in her house, which was on Van Buren Street in Passaic, 64 Van Buren Street. She lived upstairs, and the Pashmans lived downstairs. And I have wonderful memories of visiting there, but wonderful stories about people who came to her house on Fridays to collect challah, which she baked, and of one man who, knowing that she collected a lot of money from various individuals for her charities, held her up. And she said to him in Yiddish, she could hardly speak any English, and that did not deter her from having conferences with the mayor and the city officials who gave her permission for her various activities to raise funds for the hospital, including block dances. You remember block dances? It was before my time, but I understand they were wonderful. And I remember coming to visit her as a child and going up to her attic and being absolutely fascinated by this array of Japanese lanterns and all the things that you use to decorate the streets for these block party affairs. But what was I telling you about? Oh, my grandmother. She said to this man, please, in her broken English, she managed to convey to him, put away your gun because somebody will see you. I will go downstairs and I will borrow some money to give to you. That's a true story. And I'm sure there was more to it than I heard. And then, of course, there are the stories about people coming to her for various requests of food, clothing, and money, and she very often gave away my grandfather's clothes, which didn't please him terribly. But he managed somehow or other to survive these invasions. And every Friday night and Saturday, they would have orchim, that people who were in town to raise money for various Jewish yeshivas and other charities would be invited to their house for meals and would very often be put up in their house and so on. She was a really incredible, tiny woman. She was under 5 feet. As I said, spoke practically no English, fasting twice a week, doing all this marching all over the city of Passaic before there were paved streets, in fact. And one story is going into the house of a relative on Passaic Avenue. The man of the family was a dentist who was doing extremely well, and they had Oriental rugs. And my grandmother said to this woman who was actually the sister of my grandmother's daughter-in-law, why do you need to spend all that money to walk on? Why do you need to spend so much money on rugs when you could do so much good with your money? She was incredible.
Do you have any memories at all about your great-grandparents?
I never knew them. I just heard about them.
Do you know what their names were? Or anything about them?
My father's father was Shapiro.
Shapiro.
Obviously, that was my father's name.
Oh, right, okay. Your father's father. That's your grandfather.
Right. And he was a head of a yeshiva. My father came to this country in his teens, and he already had his smicha, that is his rabbinical diploma, from the yeshiva in Vilna. And Vilna, as you know, was a very prominent seat of Jewish scholarship.
In Lithuania.
Yes.
Do you have any memories, though, of Esther and Reuben's parents?
Never knew them.
I mean, you said you knew something about them, though. I thought I heard you say that.
Well, I knew about my father's father, who was, as I said, head of a yeshiva. But I really don't know anything about my great-grandparents, I'm sorry to say.
Do you know about Esther and Reuben in terms of when they might have come over to this country?
I would say they came over after the turn of the century.
And would you know where they were from?
Yes, my grandparents were from a place in, I think it is Russia now, or it was then Liskova, it was called. I think it was not far from Poland, because my grandfather, who was a cabinet maker, used to go to Warsaw to work for many months of the year. That I have heard.
So that was Reuben.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you don't remember which one was the pink, Esther or Reuben?
Reuben was the pink. Esther was Fisher.
Oh, okay. All right. So.
Their name was Pinchasovich.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Pinkosovish. Would you remember how to spell that by any chance?
No.
Okay. Well, that's still.
It
really
became pink when they came here, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
for the same reason that my friend's father became Braverman. They couldn't spell it.
So that was pink, P-I-N-C-K.
No, they spelled it P-I-N-K.
Oh,
The next generation put the C in.
Pink like.
that was your
color.
mother's generation. Put it in.
Yes.
So before that, it was just with the K. After
Right.
that, oh,
There were many pinks in Passaic. There was a berry pink who was called the Marble King, and there was a Roy Pink who had a saloon where a lot of people used to gather, of people of reputation, they tell me.
of refutation.
Pardon?
Of refutation. What does that mean?
Reputation.
Oh, okay, reputation. Okay.
Did you think I said refutation?
Yeah. I was thinking I'm
Maybe
not
that
married.
too. Maybe that too.
So, and these were not pinks that were related. These.
Yes, they were all part
they were
of the same
related.
family. It was a big
Oh.
tribe.
Okay.
My grandfather had about 4 brothers.
And would you remember their names? It was
Yes.
Roy.
No,
Okay.
Roy was not a brother. Roy was the next generation. Roy was the son of one of his brothers.
Okay.
There was Nussin, who had 5 children, 3 males and 2 females. There was, oh no, excuse me, Nussin was, Nussin had, Nussin had 3 daughters and 2 sons. Noah was the one that I started to talk about. And then there was, oh God, I'm blocked on the other 2 names.
So Nussin was one of his brothers, and that's N-U-S-A-N?
What?
Could you spell Nussin?
Nussin is a Yiddish name, so I'm just guessing at how you would spell it in
Okay.
English.
All right. And so it's Nussin, Noah,
Nussin, Noah,
Reuben,
Reuben, and one other, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Did they all come over together, do you know?
I don't know, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I really don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna...
The brother, and I'm sorry to say his name escapes me at the
Okay,
moment.
that's all right. And so you think that they did come over together?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I think not, but I'm not sure.
And they came from that small village in what used to be Poland, or maybe was Poland at the time?
I think so.
Okay. All right. And Esther, would you know where she might have come from? Did she come from the same Fisher?
I think so.
Okay. Did she have any sisters or brothers? That would be your great aunt, great uncles on her side.
Isn't it sad that I don't really know? They had so many stories to tell, and they never thought it was worthwhile telling us about them.
And you, did you
Sad.
ask? We didn't
My
ask
father
you.
had so many wonderful stories to tell about how he used to wrap his feet in newspaper when the weather got cold because his shoes had holes in it. And when he came to this country, he went to the Iran Preparatory School. Felix Iran's family had a school in New York where they taught English to foreigners. And then he went to Syracuse University. He was one of, I'm sure, very few rabbis, Orthodox rabbis of his generation that had a secular education.
That was your
My father.
father.
Mm-hmm. My father was a very scholarly man, and he used to he used some expressions which were really very interesting for an Orthodox rabbi. Latin, he would quote Julius Caesar. If he wanted to impress us with something and to give it its proper importance, he would say, ipse dixit, which means he himself has said it. And that's from Julius Caesar. And another thing I remember, he used to quote, I don't know who, the heights by great men reach flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night.
What a memory.
Well, listen, we heard this a lot. And the things you hear when you're a child are the things that register, isn't that so?
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. Because I'm trying to reach back as far as possible, what other memories might you have of your grandparents?
Well, I remember my mother saying that when they came over by ship, they were in steerage, and the person or people who slept over them urinated at night. And the trickles came down on her.
That's not a memory you get to hear too often.
Pardon?
That's not a memory that gets passed on too often.
No, well, she told me that. It was awful, the trip across. And, of course, they went to Ellis Island. And she never said much about Ellis Island. My grandfather and grandmother thought, of course, it was very important to give sons an education so that they could earn a living respectably, but they didn't think that it was important for my mother to have an education. So whatever she learned on her own. Mm-hmm. But she used to sew to make money, and that money would be used as part of the tuition for her two brothers. Which one of them found it convenient not to remember? And he shall remain nameless.
Right.
I don't know who's going to see this, but it's going to be terrible.
No, it's okay. I think people will really enjoy it.
You do?
I do, yeah. Now, Rachel. Well, you never met her. You know nothing really about her.
No,
Do you
there
have
was
any-
another Rachel in the family, and she was the
Rachel.
wife,
It's not Ruckle.
Rachel.
Ruckle.
and she was the wife of Noah. The Rachel that I knew, Tante Rachel.
Okay.
What time is it getting to be?
It's
10 after
4:05.
I really think I'm exploiting my friend.
Okay, well, we can just wrap this up then. Let me see if there's any last question I want to ask you. Would you know where your grandparents are buried?
Yes, I do know where my mother's parents are buried. They're buried in the same cemetery where my mother and father are buried in Lodi.
Okay, all right.
And probably some of the Smalls are buried there as well. I think so.
Okay. Would you have any advice for the coming generations?
Wow, what a question. In which department, for example?
Anything at all. Just generally speaking, if you could only give them a couple pieces of advice about living, or
Well, I think one of the things that has made some of our younger generation go sour was the emphasis on individual rights and individual freedom, and I have a right to whatever I want without regard to the community. I'll use that word. And I think that has really shortchanged them in a way, and certainly shortchanged society. Because- What?
I thought it was not, there was something else involved in that right. So long as you didn't hurt someone else.
Oh no, I think the me generation didn't think about whether satisfying their own immediate desires was going to hurt anybody. I think, and I think
Are you
really
talking about
that
our
we still,
children?
what?
Our children,
Our
your
children?
children, and my children?
Yeah.
No, they were never taught that.
Well, I didn't say they were, but that was part of the 60s generation, the philosophy of the 60s. And I think, as a matter of fact, if we want to get philosophical about it, I think the pursuit of happiness is a very unrealistic promise that was made to our country.
you don't think it's very attainable?
I think it's easily misjudged. What is happiness?
Depends on what you consider happiness to be.
Yes, but you know that everybody has a right to the pursuit of happiness. Yes and no. That depends on the individual's concept of what is happiness and how he's going to pursue it or she's going to pursue it. And if it means I'm going to be happy, God damn it, no matter what, I
Well,
think that's
for-
pretty
For
sad.
some people it does, but for,
Hmm?
I mean, for many it did not mean that.
No, well, it didn't certainly start out to mean that, but I think it was easily misinterpreted,
No, it could be.
don't you think?
It could be easily
Sure.
misinterpreted.
I feel that it's an unattainable promise for a country. And I think that's why we had, I think that was part of the, well, this is such a big topic, you know, the racial issue and so on and so forth, the burning of cities that we had in the 60s. My grandmother used to sing a song about Berala and Saperala.
Huh. Your grandmother, Esther.
Uh-huh.
What other memories do you have of Esther?
I have a memory of her with her wire-rimmed glasses, you know, the kind that have become so fashionable now. Those granny glasses.
Uh-huh.
And a white fachelka. You know what a fachelka is? It's a kerchief
Oh,
that she always wore when she was in the house. And when she went out, of course, she wore her peruke, her sheitel. You know what that is?
is that a wig?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So she was Orthodox.
Was she Orthodox? My God. She was on first name basis with God. And I remember she had a pantry. You know, houses used to have pantries.
Uh-huh.
And in her pantry, there was a line of pushkas. You know what a pushka is?
No.
Did you ever see a charity box?
I see cans around from time to time, but...
Well, there's a Hebrew National one on my desk in the kitchen. They were square boxes, tin, and they had either painted on them or imprinted in some way the name and often a picture of the institution for which their money was supposed to go.
Uh-huh.
And she had a long row of them. As I told you, she was the most charitable and selfless. Really, she was a saintly person.
But she was very religious also.
Oh, yes. And I remember her davening. She was always in the pantry davening.
Uh-huh.
And the pantry had a very interesting, I don't know whether to call it an odor or a fragrance, of the things that she used to make. She used to make sponge cake for every Shabbos, and she used to make kichel. Do you know what kichel is?
No. No.
Oh my God, are you Jewish?
Barely.
Barely. Kichel is a crunchy, not exactly a cookie dough, but it's made maybe it's made without flour, I'm not sure. But she used to make one, in the bakeries you find them and they're in the shape of bownuts usually.
Uh-huh.
Or round, and they're sort of concave in the center. And this, she used to make big ones that looked like big bowls.
It's this phone. Talking about kichel, yes.
It was very characteristic. It was about so big, and it was deep. It was like a bowl.
Uh-huh.
And it was made of this crunchy, sort of, I don't know what to compare it with. But do you know what bownuts are? Have you ever been to a bakery to get bownuts?
No. I know, I'm barely Jewish.
Well, you're not Jewish by ingestion, anyhow. Other memories I have of her, on Friday night, her kitchen table, which is where the family usually ate, was covered, half of the table was covered with candles burning. And when we used to visit in Passaic in the summer, that was, of course, long before air conditioning, the heat in the room and the heat thrown off by the cooking and the heat thrown off by the candles made them all
Just wither.
sort of melt in various shapes.
Wow.
And I can remember that so vividly.
Huh.
And also, she used to say in Yiddish, "Es mein Kind, niemand opfering." You know what that means? You don't know
Yes,
any
my
Yiddish.
children, something.
Mein Kind, eat, my child,
Oh,
and then take a physic.
S. And take a what?
Physic, a laxative.
Oh, I never heard that term.
Opfering is the Yiddish word for laxative. So you can never tell my grandmother that you were full
Oh.
because she knew how you could make room for more.
That was an insult to be full, I guess.
And of course, I told you she fasted twice a week.
That's right.
I did mention that.
Yes, you did. Now, you said she was very religious. Was her husband, Reuben, as religious as she was?
No, nobody was.
Really?
Of course he was. You know, he was an observant Jew and an active member of the shul that they belonged to. I think they were charter members. And he was very, very philanthropic.
Uh-huh.
And what my grandfather did was really most unusual and heroic. He signed a note when this hospital was about to be opened. They took over a nursing home down on Madison Street. It's on the other side of town.
Uh-huh.
And that was converted into Beth Israel Hospital, which was the first one. And her picture hung in the lobby with her sheitel and her glasses. And
is it still there?
no, because the hospital has been moved to another site and has been expanded several times. And boards of directors have a way of forgetting founders because if any of them were inclined to give a huge, what they considered a huge contribution, they wanted the hospital or the room or the something named for them.
Uh-huh.
So my grandmother's picture got pushed out of the lobby, and I don't know where it is now, if indeed it's anywhere there.
Huh.
But my grandfather signed a note along with all of the respectable, or I should say respected members of the Jewish community who had, who, I don't know how wealthy they were at that time, but apparently wealthy enough to be considered appropriate members to sign a note for the hospital. Then came the Depression, and all of those people who signed the note declared bankruptcy. And we lived in Utica at that time. Utica, New York. Do you know where that is?
I've heard of it.
Upstate New York,
Okay.
near Syracuse. And my father, as I think I told you, was chief rabbi in Utica. And when my grandmother and grandfather came to visit us at one time, I remember being in the bedroom and hearing a conversation between my father and my grandfather going on and on and on into the night. And my father was trying to convince my grandfather that it was not his responsibility to take on the burden of debt for the rest of the community.
Uh-huh.
But my grandfather said that his good name meant more to him than anything. And so he continued to pay that debt during the rest of his life, and in fact, the balance was paid by his estate after he died. And I used to kid about it because he had told me that at one point, my grandfather was pretty well to do. As I told you, he built the first apartment houses in Passaic. And he said he had put aside money. I think the amount he mentioned was $10,000, and at that time, $10,000 was a pretty huge sum of money. For me and for my cousin, those were the only two grandchildren at that time. And of course, that money went into the pot that was to pay for the debt, the note. So I always said, my dowry is in the Beth Israel Hospital.
Huh.
My grandfather was a really remarkable man and a very contemporary person for his age and for his cultural background. Very, very different from my grandmother. My grandmother was involved with God and with doing good, with doing charity, with helping people. And I know that my mother used to complain that her mother was not interested in anything about her personal life as long as she davened,
Uh-huh.
which made my mother a little, let's say, not too committed to davening. You know what davening means,
Yes.
don't you?
Yes. I just recently found out.
Yeah.
Well, when did you go over for Shabbos for your grandmother at your grandmother's?
Well, we never lived in the same town with my grandparents.
Oh, really?
When we came to visit them, of course, we were in the house there.
So, do you recall doing any Shabbos with them?
Of course, I've just described the Shabbos table with all the candles and the smells of the...
I didn't realize that was Shabbos. So, when you went to the Shabbos, your grandmother's Shabbos, how did you feel about the religious aspect of it? Were you really into doing that? Was that really something you wanted to do? Or was it something that you were not so comfortable in doing? Or did you even think about it? You just did it?
It was a natural thing for me to do because that was the atmosphere I was brought up in.
Uh-huh.
Don't forget, my father was a rabbi, so we observed Shabbos.
Speak with you. So, you said you thought being an observant Jew was a normal thing to do. You just grew up with that, and you didn't really know any other way.
Oh, I knew other people didn't live the way I did.
Uh-huh.
And I remember, for example, on Shabbos, which was such a deliciously, it had a different feeling. There was something spiritual about the feeling in the house on Shabbos. And I remember sitting on the floor listening to my mother read to me or stroke me, and friends would come by and want me to go to the movies, and I used to feel pity for them that they were not experiencing this delicious feeling.
Huh. So you really looked forward to Shabbos, it sounded like.
I what?
You looked forward to Shabbos.
Yes, except for one thing. When my father was preparing a sermon, let's say if it was the last minute on Friday, things got very tense in the house and we couldn't really make too much noise.
But over the years, and up to now though, I'm guessing you haven't remained as observant as you were raised to be.
No, as a matter of fact, my orientation is Orthodox, but my lifestyle certainly is not. And at this time, I am a member of a Reformed congregation.
Uh-huh.
And actually, I feel like a displaced person. I'm not at home in an Orthodox shul anymore, and I feel also not quite at home in my own Reformed temple.
Interesting. Have you ever considered doing a compromise at a conservative shul?
I was a member of Temple Emmanuel, which is conservative, in Passaic, my husband and I, for 30-some-odd years. When we withdrew because of a very unpleasant schism that developed between the cantor and the rabbi.
Uh-huh.
So then we went shul shopping.
Were you comfortable there, though, before that happened?
Comfortable? The connection I had with that temple was the cantor. I never felt really, I'll say I was underwhelmed by the rabbis. There were two rabbis who were in the pulpit during our membership years, and neither one of them really answered my needs for a spiritual leader, but the cantor did. And well, there was a big to do about his leaving and my relationship with the temple. I never felt that the members of that temple, for the most part, had any particular Jewish historical or religious background. But they were probably the most active members of the Jewish community here in Passaic.
Where would you say your spirituality lies today in terms of the Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Ultra-Orthodox spectrum?
I don't know if I can put a label on it. And I don't know how much of it still remains with me. But there is a dimension and there is a connection that I feel with other Jews who share my background. And I feel it's a lack in the people I know who have not experienced it. Because many of the people in my generation never really got anything that remotely resembled a Jewish educational background. And many of their attitudes result from their not really knowing enough about the reasons for certain rituals and so forth. And I feel that there's a lot of prejudice against orthodoxy because of that lack of background experience. And I feel that many of the people I know who were brought up in Orthodox homes and who turned away from it as soon as they could had a negative emotional connection with it. And I always felt a plus. I felt that what I had, what was conveyed to me in our house, was worth a great deal and gave me a dimension that otherwise I would not have had.
Does that comfort you now?
Does it comfort me?
As you obviously become older and you approach the time when you won't be here anymore, do those beliefs that you learned as a child, do you think of them now, and do they help with reconciling you with that?
Not really, because actually my connection with the ritual is based on nostalgia rather than... Now, I do enjoy it, and I do love it when I experience it with other people on the holidays or on the Sabbath. But I, living by myself, don't really fully practice it. It just isn't the same when you live alone. I light candles on the Sabbath, but that's it.
Do you still say the blessings?
Yes, I do. It's a matter of rote, really. And actually, my feeling about God is very nebulous.
Mm-hmm. Might you call yourself an agnostic?
Possibly.
Do you have any thoughts about the life after, the existence afterwards, after death?
There are times when I feel that there's somebody up there who's looking after me. And there's a Hebrew word, two Hebrew words, chus avos. I haven't used that in such a long time.
Could you say that again? What are those words again?
Chus avos.
Okay.
It is, I'm trying to think of a translation for the first word, chus, which is because of their caring, because of the caring of the fathers, one is sort of protected.
Uh-huh.
And there are other times when I feel somebody up there is out to get me. So I really have very mixed up theological ideas.
So things seemed simpler when you were a child and they became more complicated, it sounds like, as you grew older.
Well, in a way you could say that, but the things that I practiced when I was a child were very comforting and very meaningful. And I was a Sabbath observer, didn't ride, didn't write, didn't do any of those things until I was a senior in college. And we had our senior prom, and in order to get to it, I would have had to ride. I had never done the Sabbath before. And my father had died when I was a freshman. And so I asked my mother's advice about what should I do. And she was very wise and didn't advise me, but sort of gave me permission to make up my own mind. So I rode to the prom.
By the way, your father died pretty early. Do you remember what he died of?
Pneumonia.
Pneumonia.
That was days before penicillin.
Okay. So, in terms of thoughts you have about, or maybe thoughts that you have about the existence after death, is there anything more
About what?
about the existence after death? What happens when we pass over?
I don't think I really believe in life after death. I don't think I really do.
Okay. Well, you've lived a very long, full life. I'm sure people tell you that all the time. Or do you feel that? Do you feel that you actually have lived a pretty good, full life?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. By the way, you haven't asked me about my siblings, have you?
No, actually I haven't. That is one of my questions, but...
Okay, because I have a brother. I have one brother who is a very unusual person. He has made great contributions to the Jewish community of Pittsburgh and to Israel and to Jewish people everywhere, not only because of his generosity, but because of his actual work and investment of himself in the various organizations that he supports.
Uh-huh. What's his name?
His name is Zalman Mordecai Shapiro.
Could you spell his first name?
Zalman.
Okay. And he's still alive?
Oh, yes, he's younger than I am.
Uh-huh. Pittsburgh.
He's 3.5 years younger than I am.
Uh-huh.
He lives in Pittsburgh. His wife's name is Evelyn. They have 3 children, one of whom lives in Israel and is the father of 10 children.
Wow. Do you know what their names are? The
The-
three
what?
children. The 3 children.
The 3, of course I do.
Okay.
Alan Joshua, Ezra, and Deborah Esther.
Do they go by their middle names with their first, like Deborah, Esther, or is it just Deborah?
Deborah is Deborah, Ezra is Ezra, and Alan Joshua is Joshua.
Okay. Which one lives in Israel?
Ezra, he's a physician.
And so he's a Shapiro also?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Returning for a moment back to your life, do you have regrets about anything you've done in your life?
I have regrets about the things I didn't do, the opportunities that were available to me that I didn't take advantage of.
Can you give some examples?
Well, when I was on the Board of Education here in Passaic, I was asked to be president of the board, and I really didn't have enough confidence in myself to do it. And I feel that that would have been a very enriching experience. However, I did many things while I was on the board. I think I mentioned them yesterday. I was involved in teachers' committees, and I mentioned I was also involved with Teachers College in New York. I did a lot of public speaking. I was also invited by Teachers College to talk about the survey that I participated in 2 successive summers to a superintendent's workshop. And these superintendents came from all over the country. I was also invited to speak to the it was a newly organized state board, state, what do they call them? Board of Education members, something, yes, State Board of Education. That's exactly the name. And I did that 2 successive years. Another one of my regrets is that when I graduated from school of social work, I didn't take one of the jobs that was offered to me so that I could have had that experience immediately after school. But as I think I mentioned yesterday, I thought that it was my role as a wife of a physician to become involved in the community, and that's what I did. Now, I can't say that that was not enriching, it was, but I feel that, for example, being on the state, on the, what the devil did they call themselves? The organization that was meant to embrace members of boards of education in the state of New Jersey. And they used to have meetings on Friday night. And I decided that Friday night my place was home, so I didn't accept that. There was another idea that I had for a radio. That was really before television became what it is today. A radio program about events and people in the state of New Jersey. And subsequently, we see that done on all the talk shows.
Uh-huh.
And I went to the new station, I think it's WOR, and I was offered 13 weeks of trial, and I was supposed to submit the copy for it, and I chickened out.
Huh.
That is a big regret. Instead of that, what I did was this newspaper column, I told you about that yesterday.
Yes, you did.
And I went to see editors of most of the big papers in New Jersey, and many of them couldn't see the value of it, but of course there were 4 that did, and eventually the column began to be taken over by its own staff.
Uh-huh.
So I did this with a friend of mine. I never wanted to be involved in the details of the typing and the tabulating and so forth. But I was a contact, I was a liaison with the editors and with the agencies that we wrote about in the column.
I have only a few minutes left because I have to get this camera back. Unfortunately, I've rented this camera and I have to get it back before they close.
When is that?
It's 9:30 now,
Yep.
and I have to get it back by 10 o'clock. So let me ask 1 or 2 more questions. It sounds like your regrets in life more are about things you didn't do rather than things you did do, which I find interesting. It sounds like you really don't have regrets about the things that you've done in life, but rather than the
There are some
opportunities.
things I would have done differently if I had the experience I have now. But anyhow, what were your other questions?
How does it feel to be an elder of the community? I don't know if you see yourself that way, but
No, I don't see myself that way because actually I'm not active in anything anymore.
well, an elder doesn't have to necessarily be active, but you are certainly a pretty clear-thinking person who's in her 80s, who really has an incredible amount of life experience, and you're looked up to by a number of people, so that makes you an elder. Whether, I don't know if you see it that way, but I think a number of people do see you that way. I don't know if you have any feelings about being in that position, or any
Well,
special...
I guess I don't think about it. I know that there was a time when I was very active that indeed was a respected member of the community.
Uh-huh.
But now I feel like a dropout.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
In spite of how popular, how many phone calls you get every night, it sounds.
Well, I mean, I don't feel I'm contributing anything.
Do you think a person...
I was a volunteer at the Jewish Museum for several years, but then last year when I began to have all these health problems with my sight and with walking, I had to drop out. I could no longer do it.
And I'm sure people understood that, although it sounds like you had a more difficult time with that than others did. That typically is the case.
Sounds as though I did only things for the Jewish community, but actually I was involved in the United Nations group and League of Women Voters, and I was on the board of the mental health clinic, and I was also asked at one point to be in charge of the fundraising for the what's the non-Jewish equivalent of Federation that do all the non-Jewish charities in the community.
United Way.
Well, it's called United Way now, yes. And I didn't accept that. At that point, I was working in my husband's office, and I was on the Board of Education, which took up a lot of my time, and I felt I couldn't handle the other. I regret that, because a responsibility that I assumed, well, maybe not everyone, but most of the responsibilities that I assumed were experiences that helped me grow.
Uh-huh.
Also, I loved being a hostess, and we used to do a lot of entertaining, my husband and I.
Uh-huh.
Guess I did have a reputation as being sort of a Pearl Mesta.